When it comes to buying a Chromebook, there's generally two camps of people. The people that want the latest, greatest hardware and the best build materials and don't really care how much it costs. And then there's the people that want the most bang for their buck and they want the best deal and they want to get as much as they can out of every dollar. If you're in that second camp of people, we might have a Chromebook for you. This video is brought to you by NordVPN. They are the VPN of choice for lots of Chromebook users and Android users, iOS users, Windows users, and Mac users. It works on all platforms and will secure your browsing whether you're at home or on the go. If you'd like to learn more about them and their service, go to chromeunbox.com/NordVPN to get started today. A quick note before we get into all the normal parts of the review for this one. And that's the price. I normally save that for the end of the review, but it informs everything about this Chromebook because when price gets low and low enough, this one being in the $250 to $260 range, brand new all the time pretty much on Amazon, that changes the way you look at basically everything. So if it doesn't have the best screen in the world or the best keyboard or the best trackpad or whatever, fill in the blank, you kind of start forgiving those things when you can only spend $250. When I can buy multiple of these for what I would pay for a higher end Chromebook, you start to forgive a lot of things. So I wanted to mention that right off the top. $250, $260, somewhere in there on Amazon. Again, the link will be in the description as it always is, but keep that in mind as we go through each of the parts of this review. So first up is build quality. When we start talking about sub $300 Chromebooks, in general, what you're met with is a lot of plastic, a lot of flimsy, and pretty much the bargain basement of build materials. And that's just not the case with the Poin2 Chromebook. Sure, there's a plastic edge around most of it, but the general large parts of it, the top, the bottom, and the keyboard deck are all built out of brushed aluminum. And so it gives it a nice kind of premium feel in general. It gives it kind of a premium look, and it makes it feel sturdy and substantial. It's a little bit heavy, and that's just to be expected when you get this much aluminum on any device, but overall, the feel of this thing does not feel like a $300 device in any way, shape, or form. I was really impressed with it the minute I got it out of the box, and after having used it for a little while, I'm still impressed with it. I like the way this thing is put together. Moving on to the screen, again, I go back to this idea of the price really kind of informing my opinion on this, but this is a decently good screen. It's not the best screen you're going to ever see, but it is full HD, 14 inches, 16:9. It's a touch screen, and it gets decently bright. It's not going to stand up against some of the high-end Chromebooks, but in most lighting situations, it was fine for me. Touch works just like you would expect it to. The colors look good. It's IPS. It has good viewing angles. So again, sub $300, I don't expect too much. What I actually expect on most Chromebooks is a bunch of washed out viewing angles, terrible colors, all that kind of stuff. And you don't get any of those things on this Chromebook. It actually looks pretty good. And when you're using it, you don't sit around and think about how bad the display is. And that's a big deal on a Chromebook for less than $300. Moving on down, the keyboard and trackpad are pretty good here. I think somewhere in like a mid-range Acer device, for instance, where you're getting a lot of travel, not the best click in the world, but it's serviceable. It's not a bad keyboard. I've certainly used many worse keyboards, and there's no backlighting here, and that's not really a surprise. Overall, typing on this is just average. It's okay. The trackpad is a little below average, and not necessarily because of the surface. The surface has a weird coating on it that seemed to help it kind of resist building up oil, so as far as smoothness goes, it stayed smooth for long periods of time. The click mechanism, though, is where this thing felt really budget. It wasn't floating around and flopping around like some that I've run into before that were really aggravating that way. That's not the problem. It actually was almost like on the other side where it was too stiff to click, and it just felt like work using it. And that could just be our model here. You may order this thing and not run into that whatsoever. So it's not a terrible trackpad. It's just not great. And so it kind of just falls in that average category. But again, I have to go back to the price. At this price point, when I consider how much we paid to get this in the office and start reviewing it, it just doesn't really bother me that much. Around the sides of the device, we're met with an interesting port selection. There's a little bit of everything going on here, but just kind of one of each one. So we've got a USB Type-C that can be used just like any other USB Type-C, so display or charging or data transfer. Then you have a USB Type-A, and then you have a full-size HDMI slot, which is kind of interesting. We don't see those very often at all. And then you have a full-size SD card slot. Over on the other side, headphone, microphone jack, and a Kensington lock. So again, a little bit of everything here. And in general, that means you can kind of live a dongle-less life. So if you just need to hook it up to a projector or a screen, you've got HDMI. Just plug the cable in. You need SD card support from your camera or something like that. Well, no need for an adapter. Just plug it in there. And that seems almost a little bit odd in this day and age because this is a slightly older baseboard in general. It's got some of those ports on it, and I kind of miss some of them. It's nice to be able to just hook stuff in and know that I don't have to have a dongle with me to get all the connections that I need on a daily basis. Finally, let's talk about performance and internals on this device. We've got the MediaTek 8173 processor. It's an ARM processor paired up with 4 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of internal storage. The 4 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of internal storage are pretty normal on lower end Chromebooks, and so while I'd like to see 64 gigs of storage, it's not that big of a deal, and we know that 4 gigs of RAM can get by pretty well for most devices. What's a little bit different here is that this is an ARM chip, and for those of you who aren't familiar, ARM chips are generally used in phones and tablets and things like that. So they are geared well towards running Android apps because Android app developers, first and foremost, are always going to write their apps for ARM-based chips first. And so what we did see is that running Chrome-based tasks and browser-based things, they get along okay. They do fine, especially if you keep things kind of minimalized. So you don't want to have 40 tabs open. Try having like 5 tabs open and only a couple apps and closing stuff in the background, and everything moves along well enough to get stuff done, and it's fine. But when we start talking about Android performance and Android app performance, I was really surprised on how well some 3D games like Modern Combat or Alto's Odyssey, they ran really smooth, high frame rates, and things just worked really well, and I could play them with the touchscreen, and it surprisingly, compared to the way it operated with Chrome, did really well. And so that's something to consider. If you're going to get this device and you're going to use a lot of Android applications, it's going to probably do better than you would expect it to at $250. If you're buying it to primarily do Chrome-based tasks, and you like to have a ton of stuff open and windows all over the place, just know that you're probably going to bog this processor down. But in general, it does pretty good, especially again, considering $250. So it all comes right back around to price and whether you should buy this device. And so as we wrap up, it's pretty easy to tell you if you're going to spend less than $300 and you want the most bang for your buck, this is the Chromebook to go for. It's just got a lot of stuff going for it in this price bracket, and you're not going to find much else that brings you a decent viewing angle on your screen, full HD, 14-inch, aluminum build, a decent trackpad, and a decent keyboard, and all the ports and all that kind of stuff. You're just not going to find something this good in this price range. One thing I do need to say about it though as we wrap up, this device actually has been out for a little longer than what we're seeing. Like, we just got it in the office a month ago and it just showed up in Amazon around that time. But it's actually been out for like a year and a half. So when you start talking about end of life with Chromebooks, it ranges somewhere between 5 and 6.5 years. I think the end of life on this one's about 3 to 3.5 years from this point on. So it's a $250 Chromebook. We don't expect it to last for like 5 or 6 years, but some of you buy devices and you want to think through how long you can keep it and how long it's going to keep getting updated. And so that is something you need to consider. Yeah, it's cheaper, but the end of life is going to be a little sooner than maybe you would expect if you do decide to purchase this device. But overall, it's so easy to recommend. I've actually kind of enjoyed using it. And again, every time I get a little frustrated with it, or I think, oh, I wish it would move a little faster, or I just don't love the screen at this particular angle or whatever, it's so much easier to look at it and be like, yeah, but it was $250. You know, it fixes so many of the issues that we have with Chromebooks in general when they're just this affordable. So guys, that's it for this one. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss further reviews like this down the road. And until next time, we'll see you.